Welcome back to the Disaster Tough Podcast. I'm your host, John Scardena. I just got back from the National Urban Search and Rescue Conference. I think Walt was on here basically a month ago talking about what we were going to be doing there. And I saw Zach Borst, Prescott Nato, Zach Borst, EM Weekly, Prescott Nato, Life Fire Layout. The three of us were hanging out with very cool people, both in the USAR perspective, but also some of our sponsors got to go out there, and we got to meet Steve for the first time. So shout out to Steve. He is also known as Steek or Skeek. I think, yeah, that's what it goes by, Skeek. There was a bowling incident. They didn't know how to spell his name. Yes, it was Steve. Yes, you should know how to spell Steve. And it populated with Skeek. So now he's Sir Skeek. So if you see proper apparel at any conference, there's a very cool guy who used to be in SWAT for 27 years. He's also in some of our Instagram videos. So if you see him, say hi, Skeek, and let's make it a thing. Also behind me, speaking of proper, if you're watching the video, I have Gus behind me now. Gus is a mannequin. He is ripped. Like he's like an 8-pack. I have a dad bod, so I literally bought a gym membership just to try to keep up. And Gus is given to us by Proper. We're very excited to make some videos in the future with Gus and with Proper. So big shout out to them. And then I saw an old friend of mine, Rob from L3 Harris. So he was out there. I also got to meet a new sales engineer, Ben from L3 Harris, and Ricky, a local vendor for them, our local sales guy. Very, very cool. They had an awesome demonstration on Thursday where they took their L3 Harris 400p Extreme, Stream 400 series, whatever. Very cool radio, as I've promoted on my show. I've seen it in the rubble piles, but now I got to see all the functionality through this demonstration. They had blow torches on it. They were dropping it into fish tanks with rubber duckies and talking on the radio while it was submerged in water. They were chucking it on the ground. They were doing all this stuff. They were even having, at one point, they had a chainsaw running in the background and just showing the noise cancellation. It was an awesome demonstration. We captured some of that. I think Prescott has a really cool video he's putting together just to show what that demonstration was like. So if you see L3 Harris, Rob, Ricky, or Ben at any trade show coming up, make sure you say hi from me. Really like seeing those guys. And of course, again, going full circle here, back to the USAR members, met and saw a lot of friends at the conference. Zach Borst and Prescott Nato just an hour ago recorded a recap all about the conference. I jumped in there for like 5 minutes max. So if you want to listen to that episode, make sure you check out Life Fire Layout or EM Weekly. We'll be playing on both. Great conversation. They talk about some of our announcements. One of the announcements that I want to push really hard, and it's really more of a thank you more than an announcement, is thank you for everyone who's already signed up for TRL Insider. You were so generous to believe in us and to like our content enough to help us keep running as an organization. Also, for those people who've been giving us those $5 donations to help us get better equipment and to improve our stuff, thank you so much for everybody who's been going on to thereadinesslab.com to sign up for either of those. If you do not know what those programs are, I would implore you to check out our Instagram video that explains all about the Insider program, from monthly audio TTXs, we have sounds and voices and the whole thing. It's really advanced stuff, to webinars that's coming out, our own special forum for the TRL podcasters, to discounts from our sponsors like Proper, who's giving a 17% discount starting on November 17th. So that's a big 1/7 on the 1/7. So make sure you check that out. All this really cool stuff. So check out TRL Insider. And if you just like these podcasts, like myself or Zach Prescott, any of our other podcasters, please and thank you for those $5 donations as well. That means a lot to us. So fast forwarding on to the topic of conversation. So again, I'm letting the guys who did the USAR conference do the USAR conference recap. And that was Prescott and Zach Borst. What I want to talk about is an article that I was asked to add some commentary on LinkedIn. A lot of you are doing it too, which is really fun to see the community starting to come together on LinkedIn about emergency management. But The one that I'm talking about is when I was asked to provide thoughts on planning and how to prioritize. And I started off by saying a semi-controversial phrase, and I don't think it should be, but I think it's the reality, is there's no such thing as balance. If you are focusing on one thing, by default, you are neglecting something else. And that doesn't mean that we have to throw out the analogy of the spinning plates. I think David A. Bednar talks about how there's no balance, and one plate is starting to slow down while you're trying to speed up another plate. And that is very true, by the way. And then I went on to talk about focus on importance versus urgent. And I rounded that out with the way you know something's urgent versus important, or how important it is by the long term impact. Now, of course, I'm talking about the positive impact, the things that are going to help you out. So I just want to expand on that a little bit today for this podcast episode. The L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapsed and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio at l3harris.com right now. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today. I'm going to be doing a couple podcasts between now and Thanksgiving, recognizing that everybody wants content, but then they all go on vacation. So we're going to try to help you out by doing a couple extra episodes. But that being said, today, how do you prioritize important versus urgent? And why is important more important than urgent? Funny enough. Well, let's start off with this. Kind of a catch-all, right? It's okay if some things fail if they're not important. One of the reasons why emergency managers just get exhausted is scope creep. Everything is urgent. Sometimes nothing is urgent, and all of a sudden everything's urgent, and then we all know what that's like. And that can be overwhelming in a lot of things. Whether we want to admit it or not, Gus in the background is never overwhelmed because he's always in shape. But for me, it's a big deal, right? I don't have the capacity to do everybody else's job, to take what's important for everybody else and what's important to me and this business and my family and my religious beliefs and everything. There's so many things that we could focus on, and most of them are good. The other catch-all, as I want to say, is that if we are talking about prioritization, I'm talking about wholesome, good things that are positive for you, right? I'm not talking about the other stuff, right? Like the long-term memory versus the long-term win, right? And so basically I want to qualify this by saying whatever it is in your life, it doesn't matter the time. The number one thing you have to focus on is life-saving, life-sustaining. Number one. Every day you need to eat. Every night you need to go to sleep. Hopefully, there's been lots of maybes there in the past, but my kids are number one. I will spend time with my kids as soon as I get some free time. It's the number one thing I like to do in my free time, right? I will even move things out of the way in order to create free time for them because they're more important than that. That's life sustaining, right? Life saving for me sometimes. So life saving, life sustaining, number one. Number two is important over urgent. And the way you know that something's important is to think, will this impact my life either in a negative or a positive, or negative way if I don't do it, or a positive way if I do it in a week? How about a month? How about 5 years? How about at the end of your life, right? 50 years from now, 30 years from now, whatever that may be. And the more I have focused on the long-term wins, the more I have realized that so many things that seem urgent are actually just a distraction. They're not important. And it's okay that they fail. And it's okay for you if they fail. And some things that don't seem very important or very urgent all of a sudden become very urgent when you think about habits like working out. This mannequin, I have a dad bod, father figure, whatever you want to call it, and I literally inspired me to get in gym pass. I'm not even kidding. I was like, oh shoot, I got to work out because I need that healthy habit for me to have life saving, life sustaining, right? Some other things, like things that are happening in business right now. By the way, uh, um, I had this episode a long time ago about how emergency management is very much like business and is the best preparation I could ever gotten. Leadership skills, project management, prioritization, all that stuff. And I refer to that often in the podcast episode. However, I had an issue before thinking everything was urgent, and something would pop up, and something that was urgent to somebody else. You might have heard the phrase before: "A lack of planning on your part doesn't create an emergency on my part." I actually heard that in an economics class maybe 15 years ago, and I was like, "Oh, that's a cool phrase." Didn't really implement it for like another 10, 12 years because if you're probably like me, what you are, you're humanitarian at heart. You want to help people out. I want to say a people pleaser, but you want to make other people feel better. That's why you're in the field that you are, and it's hard to say no. Once I realized that it's not gonna matter tomorrow to them or to me, or in a week, or in a month, or in 5 years, then it's okay to say no. Like, hey, I don't have time for that. Let me help you out once I have some free time, right? All those kinds of things. But in a small business, you're in a constant state of response. If you've been in a response before and you know what that feels like, it's like um, it's like you're running on adrenaline, but it's not like adrenaline like you're skydiving adrenaline. It's like trying to get to the next win. It's almost like an addiction sometimes, to be honest. Like trying to get those wins, especially wanting to do it right. By the way, you lose sleep, you lose all other things, but then you fast forward and you're not as effective without sleep. You're not as helpful by losing those things. So now I go through. Here's just to give you a counter. I'll be my own devil's advocate here, right? About a month ago, somebody called me at 8 o'clock at night and said, "Hey, they need a proposal tonight, uh, or we don't get this contract." And we really wanted it. It was really exciting to work on, like cutting edge stuff. It was on the Doberman side. And that was something where I looked at my tasks. It was 8 o'clock. My kids were already into bed. Was it worth losing sleep over? Yes, because although the habit is very important, I had to get this work done. And so I ended up working till 4 o'clock in the morning and found out when the guy woke up the next day at 6 a.m. or whatever, it was the first email he saw, and he was just like over the moon about it. And we ended up being awarded the contract, and that was worth it because that was a 3-year contract. And so by by looking at that, you can recognize that sometimes things that are urgent are also important, also kind of life saving, or at least in this way, life sustaining, right? Like keeping this business going. So it's important to recognize that. Other times I've gotten the call and it's like, hey, I really want to do this thing. Do you want to do it or do you need to do it? Well, I guess I want to do it. Oh, okay, let's have a conversation about like, don't wake me up at 2 o'clock in the morning for a want, right? So there's that. There's also you got to be clever. You don't always set your own tasks, right? You have a boss, and that boss is going to help you determine what is important for you sometimes, and sometimes urgent is important. Um, but really, what I'm trying to get to is just for the conversations I had this last week at USAR and that article that I contributed to maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. Rounding that out, a lot of people are trying to spin a lot of plates and they think they're doing this balance, and yet they're being overwhelmed and they're exhausted. As you move forward in out of hurricane season, out of wildfire season, going up to Thanksgiving, we're looking at what's happening right now in Israel and Ukraine and election years next year. And there's going to be a whole lot of moving parts, both in your personal life and around the world, right? I would implore you to do an exercise between now and the end of the year where every time a task comes up, um, put a scale right next to it, a one to 10 scale, and ask yourself, will this have a positive impact in a week or a month or a year, right? And start writing out the number that you think how impactful it is. If it's anything below a 5, you should seriously ask yourself, why are you doing this? Right? What's the value of it? What's the value of your time? It's a little different at work because again, you have priorities for your work. Sometimes sending out that email is not important and no one's going to remember it, but they'll remember if you don't do it. Right? There's that side of it as well. The positive and the negative impact of long term. So you got to think about that as well. Um, uh, if you're not happy in your job, and that came up, I think this week too, is just like, well, what are you prioritizing yourself on? I had a conversation with somebody, and they're like, well, I'm just not enjoying my job, and we talked about like, okay, what are the tasks that you're doing in the job, and we found out that they did end up liking some things and not like other things. One of the most honest questions I had for them was, have you communicated that to your supervisor? And it was like a blank stare, like, "Oh, no, I haven't." It's like, well, why not? There was a wonderful story by Prescott Nato, where he's a firefighter. He's still a fire captain, by the way, in Williston. Perhaps I was gonna be happy about that. I always mess up the name. Williston Fire. And he talked about on a panel that he went up to his fire chief and said, "Hey, I really think we need to start focusing on this public messaging stuff." And it took 2 years for the fire department to finally build up enough trust to create a PIO position and to allow him to interact with the media. He's now on the news every single night. He has an amazing, amazing relationship with the media in Vermont because of what he was doing. Now, did he still have to do all the other tasks? And I bet you he still liked all that other stuff. And I think he talks about that even. But he also excuse me, but he also found something that he genuinely loved and he wanted to focus on, interacting with the media, being a PIO. And he had to take steps to do that. Um, that is a person who can understand a long term impact and not just have so much passion that that passion looks like urgency and therefore ruining the good work that they're doing to get there. I believe in his timeline, that was roughly 10 years ago, yeah, 10 years ago. And it took 2 years to build up enough trust to make it a full time job. But his captain or his chief did start giving him, responsibilities here and there and start testing it out and seeing what it looks. But he had to speak up, and he had this long term plan. He eventually became it, and so I guess that would have been 9 years ago because he talks about being 7 years ago. For the last 7 years, he's been this incredible PIO, and he actually taught at our dynamic populations course about being a PIO. And you can see the passion and the intelligence and the path that he took when he talks about it because he's puts that much energy into it. But he didn't allow the passion to overcome the long term win. And that's what I would leave you with today is looking for the long term wins as an emergency manager in your relationships, in your hobbies. Do you like doing it? Yes or no? If you don't like doing it, doesn't matter. If you do like doing it, doesn't matter. Right. And I bet you'll find through this exercise of just 1 to 10 scale for matter next week, next month, next year, that those numbers and if you're able to actually have the courage, if that's what you want to say, to weed out the things that are urgent but that don't matter, or the things that are not urgent and also don't matter. If you're able to weed that out, you're able to focus more and more on the things that you do want to do, and you also might be able to find a new hobby or a new passion in between there. And so that's what I would do. If you're trying to figure out like what's urgent versus what's important, and if it matters, and you're struggling with that, ask your counterparts, right? Ask us in the field, and we'll help you out. Please check out Proper Apparel. Please check out TRL Insider. Please check out L3 Harris. All the good things. You and these sponsors allow us to keep operating and keep growing in positive ways. The long-term wins, like I said, we worked on that for a year to get TRL Insider up because we wanted to make sure it was right. So check out all of our stuff. Oh, also, again, last big shout out. please, please, please follow our Instagram channel. We had like 400,000 views on our hilarious content from last month, but we have like no followers. So please follow our stuff, and that would help us, keep on wanting to produce awesome stuff for you guys. And we will see you for the next one. Peace.